In terms of patterns that I see, in terms of, I guess, fundraising, typically around that Series B plus stage is when I see people are really willing to be like, we now have the ground and footing to look at other markets and do it properly, not just one off, do it well.
Today we're talking about how to expand and scale into international markets. We're looking at the considerations to enter a new market, building and sustaining relationships in that market, how to create a brand presence there, and then also value-based pricing for foreign markets. We have with us our expert to help us on this journey, Puja DeGamia, who's the Head of Strategic Partnerships at Tech Nation, part of the Founders Forum Group. She also previously held high-level roles at The Economist and Darktrace. We hope you enjoy this episode. I'm Amma from the Bay HQ, and this podcast is powered by HSBC Innovation Banking. Hi Puja, so today we're talking all about how to expand internationally and to scale into international markets. And I think it's something which is on a lot of people's minds. And what factors should they consider when they're thinking about when's the right time to enter a new market or to go beyond their domestic limitations?
It's something that I love kind of exploring with different businesses, different business models, different products. I think there's never, and the truth is, to be fair, there's not one right answer to this question. It really is dependent on are you selling a product or a service? If it's, obviously a more agile product like an AI software, SaaS-based product, you might be able to scale internationally from day one. You might not even have one key target market, you know what I mean? Versus a service or a very niche tech product in a niche market like climate tech, for example, which is more developed, perhaps arguably in the West, in the UK and Europe a bit more than places in Southeast Asia and such. So I would say there's no right answer to it. Depends on the resources, the capabilities, both financially and not. In terms of patterns that I see, in terms of, I guess, fundraising, typically around that Series B plus stage is when I see people are really willing to be like, we now have the ground and footing to look at other markets and do it properly, not just one off, do it well. And we've done our homework. We know that we have appetite in this market. We know that we've had inbound inquiries from this market. And if there's that kind of consumer interest already, and naturally, it's probably a good way to start going. Or alternatively, I know that these are trends in the following markets. We've done our market research and the facts line up, and maybe now is a good time. So, yeah, again, no right answer. Series B plus is probably a safe time to do it, but kind of weigh up resources, both financially, capability wise, team wise. All of those things I think are important to bring into consideration when doing that.
As you mentioned there, different depending on the type of product. If it's a SaaS product, for example, maybe it's easier. Or if it's a low thing, maybe it's easier to expand internationally. But let's say if there's people who do have high cost products where there's a bit more investment involved from those companies, and they're also going to need to establish a brand in the other country to gain some kind of momentum. What kind of things should people be thinking about before they even launch, about how to get the right kind of ideas about that market? And is it okay to just plug and drop, like, okay, this is what we do in the UK, let's go and do it in France now? Or what kind of things should they be doing before making those kind of steps?
I guess things that I've learned from I guess I can speak from a partnerships, sales, business development perspective, while I've had the good fortune of being able to explore these things in the roles that I've done, I guess, at tech startups and also big multinational companies. And being like, I just read this in the news about this company or this market, and it's kind of out of my remit and we don't technically do that, but why don't I just reach out and see if they'd be happy to have a conversation? So very simple things, like even just, reaching out to stakeholders or companies, and by companies, I mean one's client base, who you think they would be, who would buy your product or service. Reach out, have a chat. Is this something that you would be interested in? Is this of value to you? Or have a chat about their priorities in terms of what are your key priorities as a business? fundamentally, if you're trying to do X, Y, and Z, and our product either directly or indirectly helps with those things, again, when I say product or service in terms of connecting people, whatever it is, then it's worth having a conversation or moving forward in some way or the other. Um, and I guess commercially, it may be different than how you're functioning in, I guess, your prime market, but it sets kind of the ground and foundation for wider partnerships, for wider relationships, and potential business. I think some of the best examples that I know, I guess thinking back to my time in cybersecurity, the markets that we expanded to just started by having conversations from the UK and the Middle East, in various parts of the market in Asia and Vietnam. We wouldn't necessarily always think at that time that they were mature markets for the type of AI solution that we were talking about, but there was appetite, and we started slowly, and then we're able to scale just from having conversations and just testing the waters a little bit.
During this process, obviously, so I think the idea of world domination is quite common in founders' minds, right? Like, yeah, it's going to work here and it's going to work everywhere else.
Love it.
What's been some of the challenges that you came across when you were doing this kind of conversations that maybe you didn't expect, or a bit harder than you first thought they would be?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's twofold. One, sometimes you think that the people, when you reach out or have a one liner, or you send an overview or attach a few resources, that they know who you are and know what you're talking about, but that value is not always conveyed quickly. And so there's always, in my experience, there's always a bit of trial and error that goes into the way that you do approach that aspect. And then secondly, culturally, I think, I don't know if this is an interesting thing, but I find, as a relatively young woman, reaching out to key stakeholders and senior stakeholders, which fortunately or unfortunately in my field of work always tends to be way older men. There was also that level of like, oh, like, she's younger, I don't know if I really want to talk to her. What does she know? About this product. So that has always been a challenge for me, where it's like, when we've tested that situation where perhaps a senior man were to go and reach out and maybe say the same thing, at least they'd maybe get a response as well. So there is something said about kind of bringing in the right stakeholders at the right time. But also, I think that's just been a challenge that, as I've gotten older, perhaps even in my career, has helped. It's gotten better, I would say. It hasn't, but it's still a challenge that I see, especially in different markets, whether that be, I guess, traditional markets, typically where it's very male dominated at the business table, where that's always been a bit of a challenge for me. But I guess the main thing would be understanding what they would know about your business or your product or your solution, doing your homework on who you're reaching out to, whether that be a company or a person, and what they would find valuable, and feeding that into your initial outreach. That they're going to have 5 seconds to be like, yes, this would be of value to me, or no, they would have made their mind up pretty quickly, to be honest, right? So I personally tend to avoid the mass outreach for the sake of it, and really focus on what would be valuable to these people, to these companies, and focus on that. And that's kind of when the challenges slow down a little, when you're speaking at that value level. No matter what, people want to speak to you.
And if we look at establishing the brand presence, so you've talked about building the relationships, building these partnerships across the world, and obviously that's you reaching out to people, right? How can you also create that brand presence where then you get more people reaching out to you and want to be like, I want to work with you guys, I want to get your product? How have you been able to do that in international markets?
Yeah, I think social media has obviously been incredibly helpful for the world in that sense. And it is about being a constant stream of thought leadership content that you think really caters to the mission, the values that you're trying to solve fundamentally. because people will do their homework as well on you, right? When you reach out to them, what are they posting about? What are they talking about? I think that as myself, if I see something that's truly like, this is essentially what we're trying to do, let me talk about it. Let me amplify that, on whatever network that I have, whether that be, LinkedIn, even your own personal network. I wouldn't, and I'm talking people to people when you're out at dinner or you're, I would never discount that, because people talk to people who talk to people, which I'm sure you of all people would know this, right? And eventually someday someone will give you a call and be like, hey, I heard about this thing through this person. Would love to hear about it. So yeah, I guess the power of network there is probably the main thing, but doing it with the sense of really focusing on, again, what are you trying to solve for this person? What's valuable to these people? What are the trends in the world that people are looking at right now that you can talk about, that your service, your product, your company is also doing? And then you'll notice that natural outreach that comes. I have seen the more present you are, the more, I guess, online, but also in person, the more inbound you are likely to get in terms of people coming to you, which I don't think is rocket science. But it's also, I guess, the right balance of doing it without hard selling, without being in everyone's face all the time. A lot of it is to do with listening and being aware of trends, markets, what people want, and kind of purposefully creating value, I guess.
Yeah, what you mentioned there as well. So many of the things that I've done that are somewhat cool have come from the most random beginnings. So one example is I went to Cambodia. I talked to a random person in the museum because they also looked Indian. And then 7 years later, that person got me a talk at Sky South Asian Heritage Month, right? So I didn't talk to them for that reason, but because you're just talking to people and learning from people in different environments, you never know what that could lead to one day. And even if that didn't lead to that, I had a nice conversation, right? And you mentioned there as well about being in person, especially with international markets. That's often something that people are trying to work out, like how much do we need boots on the ground? Can we do it all virtually? Can we do it all online and reach out to people? Or do we need to be going to conferences? Do we need to be going to events in these places? How have you found that balance? Because obviously you've got a bigger sample size as well from your work at Tech Nation. You can see how people are trying to scale there. How have you found that balance? So what tips do you have for people in the audience who maybe are thinking about that dilemma?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I can probably approach this from my own personal view, which is it's so important to understand our market. There's nothing that grinds my gears more with than a company who's trying to duplicate something that worked in, let's say, European or Western, I guess, American companies, and then copy and paste that to a market like India or China or, Vietnam or Australia or New Zealand. It doesn't work. People buy from people, right? So you really want to understand and tailor your, not only, I guess pricing is one thing. I guess that's also, do your market research. What is the appetite to spend at the ability that they are on one side of the world to the other, but also in terms of companies, founders, and their teams, what is the approach that you need to take? You know, doesn't a direct approach necessarily work in a market like Japan or Korea or Australia even? They're very different markets to the UK, for example, where it's a little, there's an aspect of relationship building that's needed. You're not necessarily going to have, especially in tech sales, when they look for 3 week to 3 month conversion period. That might not always happen in a new market. That's not how culturally things happen. You need to build trust. You need to build an aspect of ROI, and that takes time. So yes, I guess you can't discount a physical in-person presence. So there is investment and value in having, especially if it's a market that you don't know, there is investment and value in having boots on the ground, doing a bit of scoping in the market, going to an event. That's primarily known in that region, so you can kind of test the waters and not even just see that what is the appetite to expand into this market? How does things work? Do we have the ability to do this? What more do we need? And kind of have a checkbox of questions that you answer while you're doing that. But yeah, I think the bottom line is it's really not one size fits all, no matter what your product is, even with market. There's a reason why you have global teams everywhere where you can. How do you tailor what people want in that market? And how do we change pricing? Do we need to be more flexible with this? If we price it at this, we'll never even enter that market, So what is that sweet spot? Yeah, I hope that answers your question. I think I digressed.
No, I'd love you to just dive into a bit more into the value-based pricing that you mentioned. So we hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you've been trying to do. HSBC have got the team they've built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing. They've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hsbcinnovationbanking.com. When you're going to a new market, I think the classic thing people might do, for example, is just literally convert it, right? So it's £10 in the UK, so okay, it's basically €10 in Europe. But like you said, the value creation is different. Also, the brand strength is different as well, right? Is that you might be able to charge a premium price here, whereas in France, maybe they already love your competitor and they're not going to be willing to pay that premium. So could you dive a bit more in detail into that value-based pricing system?
Yeah. I guess the way that I would see it is probably coming back to those fundamental points that I mentioned. And even if we think of it, like take out, I'm not trying to preach here, right? I mean, I'm not the biggest expert in this, but even think of it as a consumer. And it ultimately comes back to what are they willing to pay for your service or what is the appetite for their value for what you're trying to provide for them? Like you said, if there's a lot of competitors and they're willing to test the waters, but not willing to, completely jump, then you're going to have to adjust your pricing in that market. And I think this goes for services as well. I mean, even, I guess where I am now with Tech Nation, and you're expanding in our plan for global domination or world domination, like you said, that comes with being sensitive to the value that needs to be proved and trust that needs to be built in new markets. Just because it works in one and everyone knows you here, it doesn't mean it's going to be the same over there. So I guess quantifying the value, and I said this before, right? You'll see that with the big players in the market as well. LinkedIn in one market is not priced the same as it is in another market because the appetite is different. Netflix probably the same. What they're willing to pay for over here because it's such a staple. There may be several local alternatives in a market like India where they're like, never mind, I don't need this anymore. So the prices are different, or alternatively higher. So build that trust, then you can kind of commercially increase that. But I think the value is just essentially, what is a market that you're going into? How willing and how valuable do they think you are? And humbling yourself as a business accordingly, or being like, oh no, actually we can start asking what our value is, which is this, because we can quantify it with the ROI of XYZ for our audience. You know what I mean? So yeah, I would say really not rocket science, just being perceptive about where your consumer market sits and what they're willing, how valuable they think your service or product is.
So obviously once you've broken into a country, right, and you seem to have built the trust up, you've got some consumers using your product. Now it's not just about obviously breaking in, but it's how do you maintain that, right? How do you make sure you keep those relationships strong and not become complacent? So how do you try and keep an eye on that too? Because obviously there's going to be the nature of, okay, let's go into our next place. But then you might drop the ball on something we entered earlier. What kind of things do you think founders should be thinking about there to make sure that they do maintain those relationships and that brand strength?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that I definitely think about all the time. I spend a good amount of time in customer success, which I guess ultimately that's what this is, right? It's maintaining relationships. No one likes to feel like you've sold to them and then bye. You've left and forgotten about them and you've got what you wanted. And no one as a human likes to feel that way. Forget even a business, even friendships or relationships. If you think it's off of one thing, it's never. No one loves that feeling. It's very transparent. You can see it, right? So it is about, and I think it starts from the bottom up. So it's if you can build a relationship about what are your priorities, these are the values this is what you find valuable. Fundamentally, this is what we can provide. These are the solutions that we provide to your three problems. I'm using three as a number. There may be more, there may be less, but these are my top three priorities and we fix that. So fundamentally that relationship and that value has already been based pre-existing partnership. And I think that's important because that's kind of your guiding light. Like ultimately there is value there. And there's investment from both sides to maintain that value in that partnership. And then it's really about putting in the time. Founders must rely on their teams here. It's not a one man, one woman job. It takes a village. But in simple terms, having dedicated resource to make sure your team is being looked after. And whether that be through people and a combination of AI and people, even, I think that's an interesting, obviously people are leveraging that as a way to gain intel in terms of what consumers find valuable, in terms of what your partners find valuable. But you can't discount that people to people check-in, have a check-in. Obviously big businesses do this in the form of a quarterly business review. And they do that more formally to make sure that the value is being quantified. New challenges are being brought up to light. What's working, what's not, what do we need to change, things like that. But essentially that is what it is. Have a check-in, make sure things are being, you're delivering on the value that you promised. I think that's something that as a partnerships person, I'm very conscious about. We've said this, we're going to do this. If we deliver this, the growth for both sides will naturally come because they see the value. They know that you've put in the time. They know you can do what you say. And then the investment will naturally get bigger because they're like, great, now we can do a bit more and justify more ROI to the business on our end. So having a check-in, having frank conversations about what could I have done better if this didn't work, taking ownership of it and then fixing it if that is the case. But having that conversation of, is this what you want? Did you get everything that you wanted to get out of this? And if the answer is no, what more could we be doing? And then I think if you're having those honest conversations, you could even turn things around in my personal experience, in terms of partnerships that were maybe even about to be lost, commercially, but even just putting in that time to show we're willing to fix things, that also, I think, completely changes, I guess, perceptions in terms of how you're willing to go about mutually moving towards success, No,
so I think a lot of the things you mentioned in the Safe Finance episode is going to help so many people listening. But before we go into quick fire questions, is there anything we haven't mentioned about scaling internationally that you'd love to bring up and share with the audience any tips or tricks that maybe haven't come to any of the questions yet?
No, I think I've pretty much mentioned. I guess the key thing is just, know what you're going into. So do your homework, ask questions, talk to people that you know in the market. The more the more you have in your armor to kind of build and protect yourself from, I guess, build in terms of success and then protect yourself in terms of threats or challenges that you foresee in a market that's not your home ground, if you will. So be on the ground. I personally am a big fan of that. And the rewards may not, I think it's also important to remember, just because the rewards don't come immediately doesn't mean that groundwork wasn't valuable. It takes time. Relationships, partnerships, building trust in a market takes time, but you have to start somewhere. You can't, I think oftentimes I've definitely seen in the past businesses are like, well, we did a trip and we didn't close any deals, so we're never going back there. It didn't work. Um, or, we went in with our business model of doing a trial for 3 weeks and then they didn't buy after. So I'm not sure what we're doing wrong. But maybe it's because in that market, it takes longer than 3 weeks. It takes 3 months, 6 months even. But you're there. And so constantly put in the work. I wouldn't be dissuaded from, as long as you've done your kind of background market research and the general numbers make sense in terms of market size, in terms of value perception, don't be dissuaded by the fact that things don't convert immediately. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
You mentioned there as well about knowing what you're going into. So can you tell us as well, like, what are you going into? What's the future hold for you?
Oh my God. So it's an exciting time. Really excited about Tech Nation, and it's kind of revamped with Founders Forum Group, which I know is very well known in this market, but also around the world. I think Tech Nation has left an amazing legacy, and now that it's in under the umbrella of the Founders Forum universe, as we like to call it, it allows us to really scale globally, which is great, and go above and beyond the UK, and also take great entrepreneurs within the UK that we have in our ecosystem and hopefully allow them to scale around the world, which is great. We've just launched our Future 50 cohort, which we're really excited about. So they're a great group of 25 plus Series B plus founders and companies. There's 25 of them. They've raised 1.34 billion, I think, between all of them. And they're also really they're at that stage where they're looking to grow and scale, and I'm excited to kind of spend more time with them in the coming few months and yeah, be a part of their journey in some small way or the other through kind of the great things that Tech Nation in general are doing.
All sounds amazing. So we're going to have to move on to quick fire questions now. First one.
Okay. I'm nervous. I'm scared.
So first one, nice and easy, is who are 3 British Asians you think are doing incredible work and you'd love to shout out for the audience to pay attention to?
Interesting. So I'll start with 2 artists that I just find artists some of the coolest and most savvy entrepreneurs in a way, to get attention in terms of the great work that they're doing. They have to be entrepreneurial in their ways. So shout out to Spicy Kraut, Lisa Luchkin, who has amazing art. If you haven't seen her stuff, definitely check it out. I love that it's so Asian inspired and very empowering for women, especially Asian women. And it's just cool art that I want to hang up, in my living room. I'm going to get her to commission a piece for me one day. I always keep telling her that. So that's one.
Shout out as leverage. We're like, I shouted you out. You should commission a piece for me.
Yeah, I really, honestly, I really should. I was like, that's your little piece. No, but another one is Shumaya Khan. Also very, very great, and I'll give you the details to give out. But really, really great artwork. I think she's looking to get a gallery soon and have more presence in the market. But they both do great pop-ups all around London, and I would just love to see them succeed more and more. But that's really cool. I guess I'll group them as one, even though they're 2 different people. Yeah, a bit of cheating, but shout out to my art crew. I got to shout out Natasha Tucker from Tech Nation, who, it's the reason why I know you. So, no, I'm just shout out because she's our global talent lead at Tech Nation, kind of championing the global talent program, especially the global talent visa program that Tech Nation does. But it's mainly just she's so passionate about bringing Asian talent to the UK in terms of work, but also in terms of living and having a longer term, establishing a great life here. So shout out to her, my girl. And thirdly, I guess Mridula from Peppy Health, who's part of our Future 50. Really excited to spend more time with her, but I shout out just because it's a great business model that she has, and especially catering to uh, things like fertility, and women's health, and I guess connecting to kind of real health experts with an AI platform is just a cool model. So shout out to her.
So awesome shout outs there. Next one is if people want to know about you or know more about Technation, where should they go to?
Come to me, reach out. I don't bite. Yeah, I mean, we have several programs across Technation, that we're doing lots of growth programs that help kind of early stage seed, Series A, Series B plus startups grow, and kind of accelerate to where they need to be. We have a program for climate tech for underrepresented founders, which we're really passionate about. Future 50, of course. We have a Rising Stars pitch competition. Applications are still open. The finalists get to pitch at London Tech Week, which is really exciting. And really also excited to mention, I think worth talking about, we're launching a program called CREO, which is focused on disabled founders or founders that are really looking to champion technologies that help people with disabilities, and looking to build that out more, and really excited it's a great community we just launched a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, worth knowing. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me or anyone at Technation. We're online. If you want to know more, be a part of, the program, or be a partner as well to kind of help scale these incredible founders that we have in our ecosystem.
And is there anything that you need help with right now yourself, like that somebody in the audience listening right now might be able to reach out and help you with?
That's a great question. I think it's I guess professionally, it would really be meeting some great companies that are looking to join the mission and help startups scale. And looking to genuinely have valuable conversations. If that's like their mission as a business, I would love to speak to them and just get to know more, and find out how we could support them. I think oftentimes they're out there and you just don't know. And so if I'm not reaching out to them, feel free to reach out to me, because I just love a conversation, and see how I can help in whatever little way possible.
So thank you so much for coming on today. Have you got any final words to the audience?
No, just shout out to the Bay audience. What a great community. I hope I get to meet a lot more of you. You need to sort out like a community event, Amar, for all of us to meet at some point.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.